Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit. And always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hey, everyone. I just wanted to thank my sponsors for bringing this podcast to you. It's October already, everyone, believe it or not. So we need to pull out all the stops. This is the dangerous time of year. This is the time of year when we all struggle, and we're going to more parties and there's desserts out and everything. So plan ahead, gethealth.com, health code. There's tons of recipes. As a matter of fact, I was surprised. I made a couple of them this weekend. There's some pumpkin spice. There's some pumpkin pudding you can make with all kinds of good stuff like chia. There's a ton of recipes there. So use that to help you get through. If you're going to people's house for a party or something like that, just bring some health code. You can make bars. There's tons of recipes. I was actually surprised by how many there are. There's lemon, there's all kinds of different stuff you can make, and they do a good job of educating. And also, while you're there, take a look at the blog. They have tons of great information. There's Dr. Bickman just gave a little blurb on creatine and how it's helpful. So there's a ton of great free tips there. So go to gethealth, GETHLTH.com to get educated and to, find some treats and things that you're going to like over the holidays. And also, while you're at it, my other big sponsor here is Keto Mojo. They're doing great stuff, tons of great education. You're going to hear a lot more about the GKI, the glucose ketone index, trying to keep that as low as possible and just keeping yourself in good health. And so during the holidays, especially, it's really important to check those ketones and check your sugar levels and make sure you're staying on track. And then also you're going to see a lot of stuff that says keto. And I will bet you when you see it in the store or at Costco and it says keto, it's going to throw you out of ketosis and make your sugars go high. So Keto Mojo is the lie detector test. They really help us to determine what products are good and not good. So go out and support these two great companies. They're great people. I personally like them, and they're bringing these stories to you. I couldn't afford to do this on my own, so it's good having good friends, and so please support them. And we have November and December, and this year is over. So thank you for listening. Thank you for support. Have a great day. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Today I have an interesting guest. I will tell you this is a first for me. I've never interviewed a hypnotist, a clinical hypnotist, and it's crazy how we cross paths. Joseph, welcome. Joseph Onesta.
I love being here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. This is crazy, but a lot of you know that I used to be in a standard practice for 18 years. Now I'm doing the metabolic stuff in San Diego and in Arizona. And an old colleague of mine kept emailing me going, "Hey, you should talk to this guy. You should talk to this. Are you still doing low carb stuff?" And he was the guy who thought it was nuts pretty much when I started talking low carb stuff. He's like, "What are you talking about? This is crazy, crazy stuff." And then we started talking about metabolic health and what we were seeing in practice. And he agreed with me that, we're seeing a ton. Diabetes is the and poor metabolic health is the link to all this stuff. And so if we could treat the underlying root cause, then maybe we can do better at treating patients. So Joseph has been a friend of his in the world of hypnosis. And, I've always thought of hypnosis as I don't know, even know how to, almost as a sense of entertainment. Is it real? Are people really hypnotized and all that kind of stuff? And so for us skeptic, it's kind of hard to say, yeah, we see people improve. And I've seen people quit smoking. They go, yeah, I got hypnotized and I quit smoking, or I quit, craving cookies or things like that. And it's pretty amazing how the mind works. And there's so much we don't understand. So Joseph, welcome, welcome.
So glad to be here again.
Yeah. So tell us,
So,
how do you start it? Let's go back to childhood, growing up as a kid, good life. What was obesity a problem for you? Diabetes, those kind of things, or did this all develop over time? And then how do you become a hypnotist?
yeah, okay. So, as a kid, I was what they called back then husky. I was always a little bigger than other boys in my grade. And for example, when I graduated high school, I had a 34, 36-inch waist. And the average waist of a kid in my graduating class was 28 or 30. So I was always, they used to come after me. You ought to play football. You ought to play football. I just rather stay in the band and hang out with my friends. So yeah, the weight was on the periphery. Although when I look back, I think, my gosh, the average waist of a kid graduating high school today, I would have been kind of svelte. And that's a very scary thing. And
That's amazing because
so,
I wear husky jeans. I don't know if you got husky jeans, the corduroy.
no, I don't know if I own them. I always, whatever it is, I try them on. And if it fits, I had an interesting experience with body dysmorphia when I started treating my own or dealing with my own diabetes. The weight just poured off, but I didn't notice it. I kept putting holes in my belt. And I had a friend who said to me, a massage therapist who worked across the hall from me, came and congratulated me on how much weight I was losing, but told me that I was presenting an unprofessional image and told me I needed to go shopping. And I had been at that point, I did go to, I went to a Ross Dress for Less down the street, and not to bill them. I mean, anyway, but I went from what was a height 48 with muffin top and muffin bottom, if you know what I mean, and I was into 38s by that time, and now I'm somewhere between 34 and 36.
Wow.
So, but I sat in that dressing room just thinking, what's happened to me? I was
And what
more
happened?
concerned.
Why do you think you gained all the weight in the first place? Was it just lifestyle or was it stress or what
You
brought
know,
the
I think I'm going to be a little political here. I think it was the standard American diet. I did everything I was told. In fact, in the 90s, I went to a nutritionist, and she had me on a low-fat diet, and it did in fact take weight off at the time, as we know that any semi-starvation diet will do, at least while there's still time. And but it just came right back. And when it came back with a vengeance. And ever since then, I've not been able to lose weight intentionally that way again. So whatever it did to my metabolism at the time lasted a very, very long time. So you asked me how I became a hypnotist. I can very quickly. When I was a kid, I was picked on every day. I was the kid that didn't fight back, and I was the kid that was bullied on a litter from second grade to the day I graduated high school. Um, and so I was actually kind of living in survival mode and dealing with all of that sort of thing, and that may have fed into the eating. Although I will tell you, when I was growing up, there was no such thing as a snack. If I came home from school and my mother, who was a stay-at-home mom, was, cooking something in the kitchen, there was no snacking. I would have had a wooden spoon cracked across the back of my hand, reaching for a meatball or something.
well, and I just want to jump on that when you say you don't want to be political, talking about the food pyramid being a problem. I mean, it's ubiquitous. There's so many of us struggling with obesity. I was doing that, and I was doing the ADA's recommended diet, and I'm gaining weight. I'm like, okay, this isn't working. What's wrong with me? And I really, if it weren't for Jason Fung coming along and some of these other docs who say, hey, that's not how it works. And here, let me explain the science. There's no data behind what they're pushing. And then telling the diabetics to eat 6 times a day and eat carbs with each meal and all this, you look at it and go, how can this possibly be? It's like telling an alcoholic to drink beers all day long so they don't get drunk at night. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. It's exactly the opposite. And when my clients come into my office, I say what you've been told, because they'll tell me, and they're still being told that, by the way. Uh, uh, you know, I said that's exactly the opposite, and I educate them as much as I can. Although I used to be an English as a second language professor, so I'm pretty good at simplifying concepts so that my clients can understand them and digest them. And we do talk about that a lot, and how what they've been told is exactly the opposite of what needs to be done. It's Listen, if what you want to do is control blood glucose, it's reasonable, but that's what makes type 2 diabetes progressive and chronic. I mean, it's going to be progressive and chronic if you do. I'm sorry, but if you do what your doctor and the nutritionist tell you to do, unless you are understanding on your own what you need to do, it's going to be chronic and progressive. It's what happened to me. And
Yeah,
so,
and what got you there, you can't go back to what got you there and making those changes. And just the other thing I want to point out is, for me, well, weight was always an issue as a kid, but in high school, like my wife and I were just looking at pictures. I got super thin during wrestling season and football season. I'd have to gain weight, and so it was when you do that to your body over and over again, your body says, look, I know what's coming. I'm going to start like slowing down the metabolism. So that's what happened to a lot of us who did these
yeah,
starvation type diets. So you can do it, but 40% of your weight loss is muscle mass. So you're losing muscle. That's not going to be a health benefit, and that's your metabolic rate. So as your metabolic rate drops down, and you go back to what you were doing before, and you gain weight, and then we get into this vicious cycle of adding in visceral fat, and then it inhibits your ability to put on muscle mass. So riding the ship is really takes a lot of effort. Someone who's been thin their whole life will never understand that because they've never had the visceral fat problem. But those of us who struggled, we know, yeah, that's the physiology of what's happening. Plus the emotional part of it. And as you gain weight, you get picked on more, and then it becomes this whole thing. And childhood trauma and going through, being bullied in school, that has an effect on us too, and our
yeah,
self-esteem and everything else that goes on.
absolutely. And you know, we all come to adulthood with baggage, and I some parents will bring their kids to me hoping that I can hypnotize them out of eating only chicken nuggets or something like that. And they've got this sort of eating issue. And hypnosis doesn't exactly work that way. Um, it might with an adult who, like your friends who said, or your patients who said they quit smoking, they were really ready to quit, and that the hypnotist was able to glom onto that. I do that kind of smoking cessation. At the same time, I make sure that they know they're in it for 4 sessions at least, because I don't know how long that lasts. When I was a brand new hypnotist, I would call up my clients 6 months later and say, "So how's it going?" Because I wanted to see. And too many of them made some excuse and blamed themselves for going back and smoking again. So it's like, what do I do? I was a smoker, and I was fat. I was diabetic. I can use my wases to help my clients. And in fact, you're absolutely right. I tell other hypnotists when I'm training them, if you've always been thin, you're at a little disadvantage in dealing with weight loss because you don't understand. And one of the things that I may be jumping around here a little bit, but one of the things they don't understand is they think that everybody who is obese is an overeater. And they're not. I have my clients take pictures of their plates. I want to know everything they eat in the beginning and through the first few stages of the program. I want to know. And I'm looking at people who are eating a scoop of cottage cheese and a wedge of grapefruit. And that's not enough food. It's not enough protein. It's not enough nutrition. And they're not going to get anywhere. I had one client who she put me on her app, and she never, in the 3 or 4 weeks that we met, she never went over 600 calories. And I actually fired her as a client. I mean, I dismissed her and said, look, if you're not going to do the program, I can't help you. And I'm not going to take your money under these pretenses. So, because she wouldn't listen to me. But
Yeah, because she's
anyway,
not doing a healthy thing, and she's doing the same thing she's always done, right? And thinks that the hypnosis is going to fix it. And that's really an interesting thing. And we've had people, as a matter of fact, one guy in San Diego who really stands out is that he had lost a bunch of weight. He had lost like 92 pounds, and he was trying to go for 100, and he couldn't get there. Couldn't get there. And we're looking at what he's eating, and we finally got a metabolic rate on him. I said, "You're not eating enough. You have to go up on your food intake." And he said, "Well, if I go up on my food intake, how am I going to lose weight?" I'm like, well, "We'll see." And he lost weight when he went up on his caloric intake, and it's like it's so this whole calories in, calories out, like that. Sometimes it can be to an excess. Sure, for most of the time, it's going to make a difference for, if we're eating, 4,000 calories versus 2,000 calories a day. But when you get into those extremes of, 500, 600 calories a day consistently, then you start getting into trouble and your metabolic rate slows down. And again, your body says you're the worst hunter in the world. You're not bringing in any money. So I'm going to start spending less. So you slow your metabolic rate down. So it's so frustrating for people that they think, oh, if I just exercise more, if I just do this, if I just do that, and it's really an amazing thing to see when you get good nutrition and you say, I'm going to be patient with this thing and not try to lose 80 pounds in a week. You could do a lot better.
absolutely. Absolutely. We, when I'm working with my clients, we are together 4 to 6 months. And that sort of slow lifestyle change. And this is the difference. Brian, I watch a lot of videos from Low Carb USA and Low Carb Down Under, and I like especially those question and answer sessions. And some of the people that are asking questions, I admire them so much because what they're doing absolutely on willpower. And they're doing it all on their own, and they're making decisions, and they're taking ownership of their wellness. Not everyone is ready for that. And where hypnosis comes in, and I have a very simplistic way of explaining how hypnosis
Well,
works.
before we go to that, I want to know that. I want to know, how did you become a hypnotist? What did you see? What convinced you? What was it that you thought, well, this is interesting that I'm going to dive into this area?
Okay, so I mentioned that I had been bullied a lot, and in 1995 I quit full time teaching at a community college in Los Angeles and went to work at AIDS Project Los Angeles because just about everybody I knew was dying. They were HIV positive or fully diagnosed at the time with symptomatic HIV infection. And everybody, and I'll be honest, I had survivor's guilt. Like, why are they infected and why am I not? And so I created this sort of like day summer camp program for people with AIDS. And I had a lot of volunteers. Two of them were hypnotists. One was doing group work and teaching them strategies for lowering their viral load. That was an amazing thing that he did. The other was a one-on-one hypnotist named Frances. She was in her 70s back then, so she's not around anymore, I think. Um, and one day we were talking and I was telling her about my experience. She said, "You ought to let me hypnotize you." And so it was free. It was like I could learn something here. Like the other guy, he came in and he said, "I believe that hypnosis can change DNA." I looked at him and I said, "Show me the evidence. Show me, I want to see this." Because I'm too skeptical about things like that. But anyway, she hypnotized me. I would have sworn that I was completely conscious the whole time. In the session, I found myself surrounded by some kids who were hurling spitballs and rocks and calling me names. And I could name every one of them. We were middle school age about. And she said, "What do you want to do?" And I had gone through a lot since then, and I thought I had already processed, and I said I want to forgive them
Wow.
because they're just kids. And I grew up in a fairly tough neighborhood here in Pittsburgh. In fact, when I went to college and people asked me where I went to high school, they went
Yeah.
anyway. So I walked out of there thinking, boy, was that dumb. I mean, I forgave them. It's like, okay, that was so dumb. 25 years later, one of my high school alumni friends, wasn't a friend, called me up and was on a 12-step program and wanted to make amends.
Wow.
And he's confessing all of these terrible things to me. I don't remember any of them. And I told him, I said, I remember you. We weren't friends. Like, I didn't hang out with you and go to your house. But all this other stuff, I don't remember it at all. So you're forgiven. It's clearly bothering you more than it bothers me. So you're forgiven.
Joseph, the power of forgiveness, the power of saying these guys were idiots, that is one of the most freeing things in life you could ever experience for both
Yeah.
parties, by the way.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it doesn't justify what they did. It's just saying
No.
I'm not going to let it affect me anymore.
Well, yeah, if they were justified in what they did, you wouldn't have to forgive them. Like, there's a reason that you're forgiving them. They hurt me, and I forgave them. But, as I sat down, I was in a career crisis. Education wasn't becoming what I wanted it to be anymore. And at the end of the day, I can remember the abuse. I cannot remember the events and who did them. I went to my 40th high school reunion shaking hands with them. I'm absolutely certain that I shook hands with people who were my abusers, but it's gone. It's absolutely gone. And I thought, holy cow, it worked.
That's amazing. That is a miracle. That is a miracle in itself to be able to forgive because sometimes we don't even realize that we have something against someone and just to be able to have the grace of forgiveness, it's a huge, huge
It's
it's
absolutely
the
huge.
impact. I see so many people struggling with resentment and bitterness and anger and it's affecting their health all around. And when we get to the root cause, a lot of times that could be right underlying everything that you're bitter with your wife for what something she did 30 years ago or whatever it might be, your
Yeah,
partner, um, or people who wronged you when you were a kid. And then when you realize and you go back, and just going through, having parents who are divorced, you go, okay, like I've always had forgiveness going, and it just didn't work out for him. But I have one brother who really got affected by that, really, really impacted his life. So any shortcoming is because of the divorce that happened when we were kids. So it's hard when when you start having a victim role or start resenting people your whole life for something that, it happened. What are you gonna do? You gotta move on at some point.
it's one of the key elements of uh, hypnosis is that your experiences formulate your perceptions, and your perceptions color your experiences. So you find yourself on a track, and in mental health, they'll talk about uh, strategies that we form when we're children that become dysfunctional as adults. A coping mechanism of a child, for example, it worked when they were a kid because kids are kids and they don't have much choice and they have to deal with things. But as adults, they can't. It's not a useful strategy. It's maladaptive.
Like closing down, not engaging, not wanting to get hurt again, all those kind of
Right,
things.
right.
Yes.
So when we're dealing with things like childhood trauma, I'm not a mental health professional, and I can help them process, but I'm not treating any. My physician, my doctor once asked me if I could treat OCD with hypnosis, and I just said to him, look, treat is the operative word there, and the answer is I don't treat any disorders or diseases. I can help people manage them and cope with them, and perhaps even overcome some behaviors. But I can't treat a mental illness. I work with a lot of people who come in with eating issues. I can't deal with an eating disorder. I can't treat an eating disorder, but I can help somebody curb the behavior or help them manage. So anyway, but that perception from childhood, like you were talking about, I think you said your brother, how it affected him isn't how it affected you. It's the same. It's the same event. That's okay. He has to deal with the way he perceived it, and you deal with it the way you perceived it. So everybody who comes in, it's one of the reasons why I liked your talk at Low Carb Down Under. It's like when somebody comes in, they come in with a unique situation, a unique pattern, and we have to deal with that. That's the person that we're working with, rather than treating a disorder or a disease. In my book, anyway, I'm helping a person manage and helping them deal. So hypnosis, just in short, about 3 years old, you'll hear any English speaking kid say, I runned there or I catched the ball. Just about any of them. And where did they get that? Nobody talks like that. I don't know any. Do you know anybody who talks like that? I don't know anybody. They didn't get it from my family. And where did they get that? See, language is an unconscious function of the mind. From the time they were a little baby, they were taking in information, not understanding it. No baby in a baby carrier cares what's being said around them, but all of that language is going in. Eventually, about the age of 3, they have to deal with the past tense. They have to explain it's not happening now, it happened before. And their brain unconsciously makes a rule and says, put a D or a T sound at the end of some words, and they'll understand that it's not happening anymore. That's the rule. Makes perfect sense. It is a beautiful rule. It doesn't work all the time. You could try to correct that kid at the age of 3 and say, no, Johnny, it's not runned, it's ran. He didn't care. Okay, and he runs away and plays. Because up until about the age of 6 or 7, kids are in theta brainwave anyway. So they're all in a kind of hypnosis. But eventually he never hears catched. He hears caught, and his brain goes, oh, it's not catched, it's caught. And he never makes the mistake again. So like your patients who were smokers, something hit the right nerve right then and there, and their unconscious went, oh, I don't need to smoke. It sounds so simple. A lot of people come expecting magic in my office. I don't have magic. Like one of my favorite things to say is I don't work miracles, but I see them all the time. I actually have, I'm going to show it to you, an Aladdin's lamp. When I have a client who seems to want magic, I explain to them, I'm not mean, but I make a little joke and I say, look, here, you give this a rub and let me know how that works out for you. And then they laugh, and we understand that they're going to have to do their part. They're going to have to work. So
people who are listening, he just held up a genie's lamp. You rub it, and the genie's going to come out and give you all your wishes. And that's the thing is, and I think that makes a good point. So many people want the magic genie. They want the shot, the drug, the medicine that's going to all of a sudden, I could do what I'm doing now and I'll lose all my weight, or I could do, and it's a hard thing because there's no magic genie. All those genies have they may give you some of your wishes, but they're going to bring a lot of curses too. And it's a trouble that you have to deal with down the road. So the other thing is we want that, like we did, I'll starve myself, I'll lose the weight, then you gain it all back. There's something about putting the work in, but also being patient and taking your time with this, and understanding that hypnosis isn't you just go in one time and they go, okay, now I could eat cookies all day or whatever it is.
no,
It's really understanding that subconscious, like you were saying with quitting smoking, when you realize I really don't need to smoke to survive. I it's this is causing me trouble. When you start seeing stuff for what it is, then it loses its attraction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And your mind has to be right in that rule changing place. So in hypnosis, like right now, Brian, you and I are talking, and if I say something that you think is stupid or worthless, your conscious mind is going to put a label on that, and it's never going to get into your unconscious. Never. It's never the access is. This is why people stay in cults and things like that. It's like, oh, you can't see what this is. They're not listening to reality or facts. It's that sort of cognitive dissonance that they're not going to allow to happen. So when they come for hypnosis, what we do is I don't use strange kinds of hypnosis. Like I don't use shock inductions. If you're in a car accident, you have ever seen someone in a car accident and they're walking around sort of mesmerized, dazed, we might say, and they're in shock. They're really in shock. You could say, go sit down there on the curb and wait for the ambulance to come, and they'll go. That's a kind of hypnosis. Their filter isn't exactly working.
I actually just experienced that. I was in Guatemala and there was an accident. This girl I was helping, like her car, I mean, I can't believe she survived it. We were like on a country road and
Wow.
we were the first to arrive and happened to be a bunch of doctors and nurses and we got to help like, 8 people that were on the side of the road. But this girl was in a trance. Like she was like, like she had more trauma after the accident, even though her car crumbled, is that she was like walking like a zombie across the road, trips on the center divider, falls flat on her face again, and you're like, wait, sit right here. And then she would follow commands, but you're right, she was in kind of a different state, like you're just so in shock, right?
Right. Exactly. And so shock is a kind of hypnotic condition. We can also use confusion, for example, where particularly with highly intellectual people say a bunch of things that don't make any sense and they're trying to figure it out. And then their critical thinking brain just sort of says, why bother? And that's what we're after in hypnosis, because then I can tell stories, I could tell metaphors, I can use examples and give their unconscious mind information, sufficient input, so that eventually, maybe right away, maybe not right away, but eventually their unconscious mind changes that rule. Oh, and so if someone comes, for example, a lady came, she's the other day, she's lost focus in her life. She has no idea what's next in her life. She's not old, she's in her 30s. She just has no direction to go. And one of the things that we talked about in hypnosis was that whenever you're clinging to one thing, like let's say you have a partner, you're dating someone, and you're afraid to be alone, so you don't let them go, even though it's not a good relationship. You don't let them go. But while you still have them, there's no room really for anybody else. So there comes this point where you have to say, I'm going to let something go. I'll give you an example from my own experience. When I was first when my doctor told me 5 years ago now, told me that he wanted to put me on a third medication just before insulin. That scared me. And I told him, give me the list of possibilities and I'll pick one. He gave me the list and he said, if you read anything about these, you won't want to take them.
Yeah.
And
Don't read about it. Just take
yeah,
it. Yeah.
and he was absolutely right. Why would I take a diabetes medication that the side effect is potential pancreatitis? I don't understand that. I mean, I'm sorry. It'll manage your blood sugar, but wear my pancreas out, make my pancreas sick, which is important. Anyway, so I didn't call him back. I went online. You start typing, put the word diabetes in there, and you get a whole bunch of things. One of the first things I saw was uh, Timothy Noakes and his trial for what he went through in South Africa. And I'm listening to this man, and everything is coming out of his mouth is supported by science, and I could read them. I could go to PubMed and find those articles and read them and think, oh my gosh, he's right. And then Jason Fung. I mean, you talk to him, you know him. He. I read every book, all three of them: the diabetes code, the obesity code, and the cancer code. The man is a legend, and I thought I'm going to give this a shot. I wasn't educated. I confession here. I didn't tell my doctor because I didn't think he would approve, and I knew that I was taking my life into my own hands. I went to him. I experienced hypoglycemia twice, which caused me to stop the meds. Right? I mean, maybe I don't need these anymore.
I would be willing to bet they put you on glipizide,
Yeah,
which I think should
yeah,
be banned. I mean, it's horrific what it does to people's metabolic system and hypoglycemic, which is the most dangerous thing that can happen to you as a diabetic.
right. Oh, the first time it happened, it's a good thing I'm old because I woke up to pee and I was completely out of my mind. I mean, I was confused. And when I tested my blood, I saw how low it was. I was testing my blood 10 times a day, once every finger, every day, because I was curious, keeping notes. I was so scared. I had to eat something and do it. And that's I cut my sulfonylurea in half that day. And then it happened again like a week later, almost like not really as bad. But I thought maybe I don't need this anymore.
Well, I'll tell you, Joe, just as a quick side is I have a patient, she's sweet as can be in her mid to late 70s, and her family's going to put her in a home because she was having panic attacks recurrently during the day and like 4 times a day. And it was always after she took her glipizide. And so I said, let's put a CGM and see. She was getting profoundly hypoglycemic, and they were giving her Xanax for her anxiety attacks, but they weren't anxiety. She was having hypoglycemia. So once we fix that, she's now walking 3 or 4 miles a day. She's exercising. She's laughing. I mean, it's incredible, like how drugs can cause problems. And the other thing was, other people, if they did have the CGM, they go, "Oh, their sugars are going low. Give them more sugar all the time." So they're eating sugar all day just to
Right.
block the side effect of the medication, which they don't even need anymore.
I
Crazy.
had one of those myself, but it was insomnia. And I always ask my clients, I'm not a doctor. I don't practice medicine. I don't prescribe. I never tell my clients to stop their meds. I'm very cautious of my scope of practice, but I do look up their medications, particularly if they're taking something that is psychoactive, right? And so she gave me her list of medications, and I looked them up just to understand my client. And she came to me for insomnia. And I said, do you realize that this medication can cause insomnia? And it's like, I think before I take money from you, except for that session, of course, she had to pay for it. But it's like, it's like, I think you need to talk to your doctor and see if there is an alternative that doesn't result in insomnia. Go and tell your doctor that you're not sleeping. You know, doctors need to know things. And my clients, I make them, I've only run into a couple of crazy doctors. When I say crazy, I mean what they didn't make any sense even to the client.
You've only run into a couple?
Yeah, only a couple.
Okay, we'll
No,
talk off
there's
air.
one, the one, the one, her A1C. This is so amazing. Within 3 weeks, usually the fasting glucose is dropping. I have nothing, I have no other way to test except there is an A1C sort of home test for A1C.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes.
It seems for the clients that have used it, it seems to operate a little high, like it goes a little high. But apart from that, you can't test. And her fasting blood glucose was completely normal. And the doctor, her endocrinologist, said, we want to increase your insulin. And she looked at me and she said, even I know that that's wrong. I don't know. There may be some medical reason for increasing insulin when your blood sugars are normal, but I can't think of what it would be. So, can you? You're the doctor.
Zero.
All right.
Zero. There's zero
So,
benefit. It's only risk. There's no benefit. The more insulin you take, and this is what I've seen throughout my career, and and when you say you only met a couple of crazy doctors, it makes me crazy because I had this endocrinologist and he would say, you know what? Tell Dr. Lenzkes to, screw his diet. I'll give you insulin and you can eat whatever you want. And so there's the magic lamp that you're holding up. Like you're
yeah,
holding up the magic lamp. Do whatever you want to do, no problem, right? And oh, if you want to eat cookies all day, here, we'll give you a statin drug. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to change your lifestyle. And that is the magic genie you're talking about. I'm gonna have to buy one of those lamps and hold it up and go, this is what your endocrinologist is saying, because the damage of that, because now for the first time in career, we have type 1 diabetics who are obese. That never happened before because we're
wow.
saying eat whatever you want and we'll just keep going up on your insulin. The more insulin you take, the more you need. The more you need, the more you get resistant to it. And then as Jason Fung, this is where Jason Fung totally changed my whole perspective of medicine. Just talking to him for half an hour. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, so what I've been telling people has been wrong for 17 years or 16 years at that point, right? So yeah, it is so frustrating to see that. And so I would say, like most doctors are doing that. It's not that they're crazy necessarily. It's just they have no understanding of physiology, right? It's like like Jason says, if you come in and you're drinking 12 beers at night and you want to get drunk still to have fun with your partner, okay, and then have 14, 16, 18, 20, just keep going up until you get the effect, or you say, well, let's cut back on it for a month. And then when you go out, you can have one drink and you save all your money at the bar and you don't have to have, 23 drinks, to feel the effects. And it's the same thing with insulin. It's like the more insulin people shoot, the more they need. So that's always sometimes we need it to get those sugars down so your pancreas can start working again. But I mean, I might have started insulin on people twice in the last 2 years. Like it's very rare that we have to do that because we can see the train coming, like you're saying. And so, uh, yeah. And what really impressed by is that you understand the physiology, you've done the work, and you're not just doing hypnosis, you're coaching people and helping them and giving them plans. And probably the most critical thing, and that's why it would be fun to work with you doing stuff, is that long-term follow-up. I have people who follow with me. I go, you understand all this stuff. You've studied, you read Jason Fung, you know it all. But it's something about accountability and knowing, okay, I'm going to be meeting with Brian. He's going to look at my sugars, or, we're going to talk about how things have been going for the last month. And there's this accountability is a huge factor in this.
You know what? You're absolutely right, and it's also the direction. Um, I had an endocrinologist come to me for erectile dysfunction. And of course, I looked at him, he wasn't obese. All I said to him was, uh, I'm willing to work with you, particularly if it's psychological and there's this barrier. On the other hand, you might want to give yourself a test for fasting insulin, because if he's got high levels of insulin, chronic high levels of insulin, that's going to affect his circulatory system. And he just sort of looked at me and he saw I have in my office, I'm a self promoter. I have my book for deleting diabetes. He said, well, what is this? And I was telling him about it. And he said to me, you get your clients to test their blood glucose? And I said, sure. He said, I can't get my patients to do that. Then I said, that's because when they're testing for you, they're worried about something bad. When they test for me, they're looking for something good. Let's just take it in a different way. It's like when you get that pain scale. Like I think it's Bill who says, let's look at the comfort scale. I think it's him. I don't want to misquote him. If it's not him and he sees this, yell at me at the next
Yeah,
meeting.
but you're right. That changes the perspective.
It's like, oh, oh, right. Your pain is at a 6. That means you've got a 4 comfort. Let's get that comfort up.
Mm.
Instead of reducing the pain,
Focusing on
let's
the
get the
pain.
comfort
Yeah.
up.
It's true. So
And
many people focus on the pain or the problem, and yeah, it's pretty amazing that the power of the subconscious mind, and what the, I watch people like, one of the things that struck out to me, I was watching a video of Michael Jordan. He shoots this crazy shot off balance, and it was the end of the game, and it goes right in, and it goes in. And the reporter said, "Did you really think that was going to go in?" And he said, "I wouldn't have shot it if I didn't think it was going in. Like every shot I take, I think it's going to go in the basket." And that's that
right.
mindset of not thinking this probably isn't going to work, but I'm going to try it. And the same may hold for hypnosis too. Some people are convinced they can't be hypnotized, and they may be right if they're so convinced that it's hard to break through that wall, maybe, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, that's true. I've only been a hypnotist since my mid 50s. By the way, it was kind of a retirement thing for me. But the point so in my short career, I've only had 2 people that I couldn't hypnotize to, and it was that they swore that they had no imagination, that they couldn't. Your unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. That's why we get scared at movies, and why, if we think about something heartwarming, we might tear up.
Or people coming out of anesthesia too are in this twilight zone, right? Where they're crying, like these big football players. I've seen them crying. It's like, hold my hand, I'm scared. I was like, you're 6'4", big stud
Yeah,
guy. And when they realize, like, oh my gosh, what did I say? They have no idea what they said, right?
none. Well, I don't know about them, but I know about my clients. And I don't use, there's a technique in hypnosis called regression. I don't do that a lot unless we're looking for a resource, a strength that they once had and no longer had. I'm a little, I avoid it, particularly in terms of trauma, because I don't want to re traumatize them. I'm not going to guide them back to that event. But
Yeah,
I
Joseph, I
might,
want to ask you on that. Just,
yeah.
I'm just curious because it popped in my head at the moment. Other people might have the same question. When you went back to those kids that were throwing rocks at you and teasing you, did she lead you there, or did it just happen in your mind when you were in that calm state?
You know, I, hypnosis, I'm going to tell you that I have no idea.
Okay.
Hypnosis follows, the example I use is it follows a sine curve, a wave pattern. And when your consciousness is above the axis of that curve, you're sitting in my chair, you're listening to me, you're conscious, you're relating to it, but you're not judging it, hopefully. When you're below that line, you don't know that you're not conscious. So I walked out of there believing that I had been conscious the entire time. I have no evidence of that. And I have had, in the years that I've been practicing hypnosis, I have seen many clients not remember what happened in the session. Some of the things, yes, some of the things, no. So it's that sort of wave pattern that I guess I hypothesize it. No one taught me that. But it just seems that people go up and down in this experience. And the less I tell my clients, if they've never been hypnotized before, if you give yourself to the process, you'll spend a lot less time and money in my office. If at first you don't, you're curious or you're a little afraid or apprehensive, you're allowed to bring a friend. But if you're a little curious or afraid, we're not going to get very far. We're going to get some, but not very far, because you don't know what it is yet and you're apprehensive. Once you let go, your unconscious mind will not use anything that harms you. It just won't. It just won't use it. But it will undo some cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, so
It's
let me ask you, let me fire a few questions at you because this is
sure.
I remember as a kid going to like a hypnotist show and they would say, okay, whenever you hear this bell, you're gonna cluck like a chicken, and then the guy clucks like a chicken whenever this bell goes off, and then oh, you're gonna think you're naked and you're not. do you think is that real, or is it people are acting, or they want to like please the hypnotist, or is that and that's
All right.
and the reason I ask is that's the fear a lot of us have is like, okay, I get hypnotized and you put some crazy thing in my brain, then all of a sudden I want to eat whatever, some weird
Yeah.
food or something like that.
Um, there's the thing about the suggestions that happen in stage hypnosis. Let's just look at the context, right? Those people volunteered to go up on stage. They volunteered fully knowing that they would be doing silly things in front of other people. That's number one.
And that's a personality type who would volunteer to be the volunteer, right? Most of us are going to
Ex-
sit there going, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to act like a chicken in front of everyone, right?
Exactly. I've had people sitting next to me in shows saying, "Oh, I would never." And I said, "That's right. That's why you're sitting there and they're
Hmm.
up there."
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Number two, when you watch a stage, I actually was trained in stage hypnosis. I don't do it. I'm not interested, but I wanted to know. Anyway, they line up maybe 20 people
Hmm.
and end up with six because they're weeding out the people who are up there because they're curious, they're not going to give a good show, they're not real, they're resistant, they're weeding them out. So what you have left are those people who are absolutely on board with whatever. And so they give a good show. The very first show I ever saw as a hypnotist, the stage hypnotist told this woman that when he was going to bring her husband up on stage, and when he counted to three, she'd open her eyes and she would remember every bad thing her husband ever did, and she'll be so angry, so mad, she's going to acquire the language of a truck driver. She's going to curse him up one side and down the other. He brings him up on stage. One, two, three, snap your fingers. She opens her eyes. The woman turned red. You could see steam coming out of her ears. She never opened her mouth. Now, a good stage hypnotist will tell the subjects, the people up there, something like, "Thank you for giving your friends a great show. You're going to remember everything that you said and did at the end of this. And you're going to just always, every time you think about it, you're going to feel good about having given your friends a great show. Thank you so much." So after that, I went up to her. We were hypnotists at a conference in Las Vegas. There's a bar. Everyone's hanging out. I went up and tapped her on the shoulder, and I said, "Can I ask you a question?" I was just a baby hypnotist. I said, "Why didn't you curse out your husband?" She never opened her mouth. She never opened her mouth. "Why didn't you curse him out?" She said, "I don't use that kind of language."
Hmm.
You see, hypnosis can't override who you are. It's not mind control. It's getting your unconscious mind the information it needs to go, "Oh, I don't need pasta." I tried every keto pasta recipe the first year. My gosh, I tried every recipe. It was ridiculous. And now I don't eat pasta.
Yeah, and that's the thing is so many people always say, okay, we're gonna cut out the sourdough bread. Oh my gosh, like that's like you're gonna cut off one of their legs, or whatever it is. Like we have our certain things that we really like, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
we do the low carb versions of those foods for a while as a crutch maybe. But the people who just go, I'm going carnivore, I'm just gonna cut out, like they don't, like they do so much better because sweets aren't even an issue because you can make keto cookies and brownies and donuts and cake and all, and people are eating all the same food. It's just like you're substituting one addiction for another
Right,
basically, at some point. And
right.
so it becomes and we say, well, it's keto, but yeah, there's like 400,000 calories in that, right? There's a lot.
And
Yeah.
and the artificial sweeteners that are doing a job on your body.
Yeah, and all those things we just don't understand yet. Yeah, once we have a continue, there's so much we can do, and that's why I'm intrigued by what you do. I would love to have someone with a continuous glucose monitor do hypnosis and see what their sugars do because I
Oh,
I see
you
people,
would
if we
see
can
it go
calm them
down
down.
because of the relaxation.
Yeah, the relaxation part of it.
You-
And so that's a huge part of it. I'll tell you another thing that just came up yesterday, as a matter of fact. I was talking to a counselor who's a Christian counselor, and I said, "Hey, what do you think of hypnosis?" And she goes, "Oh, Christians won't do hypnosis. They don't believe in that." So it's almost like it seems like it's an occult thing to them, right? I mean, I
Uh-huh.
don't know. It's a perception. And what's your, as a Christian too, what's your feeling on that?
Well, I will tell you that a lot of Christians think that it's demonic and fooling with the devil. That's very true, but that's because of ignorant pastors who, in their seminars, are being more hypnotic than they admit to. Okay, but what I can risk when I'm getting in that discussion, I look at them and say, well, what about the Apostle Paul? And their eyes get big. And I'll say, well, he did say in the book of Romans, be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that the renewing your mind would transform you. And yet, later on in the process, in the book, he says, the good I want to do, I don't do, and the bad that I don't want to do, I do. Well, whose mind was more renewed than his? So he's not talking about your conscious mind. Your conscious mind tells you, and not only was I a Christian, I was a pastor.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah.
So your conscious mind says, I shouldn't be looking at this porn, or I shouldn't be talking to this woman because she's not my wife. But there's another part of you that wants to do it. And which one wins? That little, the devil and the angel on your shoulder. But the idea that hypnosis is not Christian is ridiculous. I'm going to say it out loud. It's ridiculous, considering the level of hypnotic work that pastors do because of the way they were trained.
Yeah, and I think especially the subconscious mind or the conscious mind. For instance, if I see an attractive lady and she's picking up on me, which would never happen, but if it did happen theoretically, I realize what I have to lose. I have a great wife, great family, great kids, all this of my integrity. I want to die and say, okay, I live my life according to what I believe. And then a million people will point at me as an example. Aha, he said he was Christian. Look what he did. Look what he ended up in. So when you see that, just like one of my good friends, Rob Sivas, says, if your favorite donut, you're about to eat it, and you're about to take a bite and it falls out of your hand. You've been waiting all day to have this, and then it falls out of your hand into a pile of dog crap. Are you going
Yeah,
to pick it up and eat it? No, you see it for what it is. And I think that's what you're saying too, is when you start seeing smoking for what it is, or you start seeing cookies or whatever that thing is for what it is, because so many of us, and that's why I think the power of us working together with people is the power of suggestion. When you start saying, I just don't eat donuts anymore. It's not in a draw anymore. I just don't eat it. If I'm vegan, I don't see a steak and go, oh, I want that steak. I was like, I don't eat that. And if you're a carnivore, you go, I'm not going to eat the certain dessert. There's a subconscious thing that says I don't eat that. And the thing is, and this is why I think what you're doing is so powerful, is I see people all the time. They eat stuff. I'm just weak. I have no willpower. I'm disorganized. I can't plan ahead. Like I'm always late. Like they tell themselves these things subconsciously and they just believe it. So I have one guy, I saw him yesterday. He's late every appointment. I'm like, do you realize you're late to every appointment? Like you come in halfway through your appointment every time. Pretend like your appointment's 15 minutes earlier. So you're here on time, right? So, some people, they just in life, they have these tendencies and they just tell them that's just the way I am. That's me.
that internal monologue, by the way, is self-hypnosis. And that's one of the things that we want to change. And I tell my clients, every time you notice yourself going down that vortex, that downward spiral of negative self-talk, you need to stop it. We need to do something about it. But let me give you a little bit, because you brought up donuts, right? I had a client come into my office and tell me in one of his sessions, he said, I was really bad. And I said, what do you mean you were really bad? And I want you to see the smile on my face, because whatever it is, I'm not going to judge it, whatever. He said, I had cheesecake. And I laughed. I said, cheesecake? All right, let's talk about the cheesecake. I don't like the word bad. Tell me about the cheesecake. Why? What was going on at the time? And he said, well, my wife ordered it and it looked so good. Okay. I said, well, why didn't you just ask her for a taste of hers? Just a question.
Hmm. Hmm.
He said, it was just a little piece. Now, he was bad for a little piece of cheesecake. So much that it was so little that he didn't want a bite of his wife's because it would deprive her.
Hmm.
And I said, well, I hope you liked it. He said, no, it was too sweet. And I said, did you finish it? Oh, yeah, that's where we work.
Yeah.
Look, okay, I bought a
Love
piece of
it.
cheesecake, right? I took one bite. It was way too sweet for me. It happens to me all the time. If I taste something, I better have a paper napkin around, particularly for a dessert, because my taste buds have changed. I'm just not interested. They're sensitive now.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. And so many people, they have to have the sweetest thing on earth to make it taste sweet at all.
Right, absolutely. My clients, somewhere in the middle of our program, they start telling me, yeah, like I don't, that just doesn't work for me. And it's like I tell them when they come in, your body is doing the best it can under the circumstances right now. Your body wants to heal, it knows how to heal, it will heal. We have to change the circumstances. I don't know how far it'll heal. Like the book that I wrote for general publication, I called it Deleting Diabetes because of computers. I don't know. And I'll tell you, there are no doctors in the city of Pittsburgh who do what you do that I am aware of. And if we're going to have to talk because I would love to say, oh, sure, send your labs to this guy. I would love that, but there aren't. And so the very idea that my clients have to bridge this gap between me and their doctor, and I'm willing to talk to any physician. I'm willing to tell them what we're doing, but the fact that it, it it is a chore. My own physician, I just left him, by the way. We changed insurance. I had no choice, and he's not my doctor anymore. But he's never acknowledged, not until I made him give me an insulin resistance test, did he acknowledge what I did. And that was 4 years. My A1C has been 5.4 or lower for almost 5 years. And I'm not taking medication.
Yeah, and that's what doctors don't realize. If we keep someone's A1C at 5.4, and then patients like you have caused a conundrum because it's like, do you have diabetes? Do you?
Right.
And that's the thing. Are you in remission? Is it cured? Is it deleted, like you say? Uh, yeah, and I think that's such an important point is doctors don't believe. But when you see it, when I saw it, I had, in 6 months, I had 11 people come off insulin. I became a believer and go, wow, this is insane. This is like, to me, I can't believe it's like, it's things that you see and you go, how can this possibly be? And that's why when we went to our friend Bill and I said, Bill, you know how much money I'm saving your insurance company right now because I'm taking these people off insulin? And the net effect is that I'm costing them money because
Right.
when people don't have diabetes or they don't get diabetes, the insurance doesn't get paid as much through the government programs. It's like that's how we save the government program. So they're not putting out all this money and plus the suffering that comes with it. And one thing it just popped in my head when we were talking, when you were talking about, working with people with HIV and AIDS at that time, holy cow, what a horrific thing to go through. And they were like uh excommunicated from society. They
Yeah.
were the lepers of our time. And I remember it was one of the most powerful, you know, episodes in my life of being a doctor is I had a patient with full blown AIDS that had, he had sores all over and, he's struggling. And while we were talking, I put my hand on his shoulder, and he just started bawling, just started
Yeah.
crying like crazy. And I said, what's wrong? He said, you're the first person who's touched me in like 3 months. Like no one will
Yeah.
touch me. And like, we knew it wasn't, I mean, most of you who knew medicine knew it wasn't going to be spread by putting your hand on someone's shoulder, right?
Right.
But the distance, people would stand 8 feet away from him, stand in the doorway, and not want to come in the room. And you think, gosh, that's like that is the most cruel thing we could do to people, dividing us and not
Absolutely.
connecting on a human level. And that's why what you're doing is so important because, just talking to you, you have a sweet spirit. You're a kind person. I can see that and I feel that. and that you want to help people. And that's like so many doctors, if they the system has chewed them up and spit them out. They have 6 minutes with a patient, 8 minutes with a patient. They're not going to talk to you about what happened as a kid. Like the conversation we
Right.
just had, you can't have that with a doctor because they're so stressed and they're thinking, I got 13 people waiting. I got to run. I got to hurry. And so we miss out. When people have insomnia, go, here's a pill. Here's a pill for insomnia. Here's a pill for eating too much. Here's a pill for, or your heartburn. And not say, okay, what's going on in life? And so someone like you, this is an intimate relationship that you have with people, going into the subconscious mind, and that human connection that you have, of listening and saying, okay, let's let your brain go where it's going to go. And how do we fix the messages you give yourself,
Can I confess something to you?
Yes.
One of the reasons why I became a hypnotist is that I couldn't charge for pastoral care. Like ethically, in my mind, I couldn't charge for pastoral care. When the people come into my office, I'm not a pastor, I'm a hypnotist. It's a psychological game that I play with myself. That's or I play on myself. Maybe it's like a trick. But I thank you for saying what you said. It's very affirming. I would love to help. The only time I don't absolutely charge is if they come in for religious trauma, and and that to me is more pastoral than anything, and I can't charge for it. But the rest of it, and there are a lot of people with religious trauma. It's
Tons of people that I
I'm
know. Yes.
and it's a confession. It's like when I was at that point in my life, if I could go back into full time pastorish, I didn't want to pastor a church. That's very messy. I want you to know. Every
I know.
pastor
I
you
have friends who are pastors. I know it's a messy, it's a it really is a messy, difficult. Like people, I always tease them. I go, you only work one day a week. What are you complaining about? Sometimes
no.
you work Saturday, and I'm joking because I know how much they do, and they're going to hospital beds when people are dying and they're sick family members, and you have so many, even going to birthday parties or people in your church. I mean, that's a lot of takes a lot of time, and
It
weddings and
does.
whatever it might be.
It 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 consumes you,
Mhm.
but because you believe and understand that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, that it sustains you too.
It's a calling. It's a
Yeah.
calling.
And I'm going to be honest with you. For me, this diabetes, obesity aspect of my practice, I'm gonna say something crazy. Diabetes was one of the best things that ever happened to me because it got my attention. It caused me to learn. I mean, when I started, I didn't know the difference between type 1 and type 2. And I had to study so much. I'm hoping at this Boca conference, by the way, that I have recognizable metabolic heroes, and I want to walk up to them and say, thank you so much. Not only for me, but on behalf of my clients. Thank you for standing up, for going against your. I mean, look, what Tim Noakes went through was incredible. And if he didn't stand up to it, I mean, let's think about it. He was an author. Did he really need? He wasn't even in private practice. He
He
could
was the
have.
most published doctor in South African history, and then they all said this guy's a quack. He's crazy. Everyone abused him. What he went through, and at the end, the judge looked at him and said, I want to apologize that you went through this trial. He has stacks of papers, and the prosecution had nothing to support what they were saying except power and money. And so it was such a, and when I saw that, I thought, uh-oh, this is a crazy time in medicine. Because if you're going to have to go through 3 years of trial for telling people not to eat sugar and cookies and donuts all the time when you're diabetic, like that is, and they were trying to argue the point that doctors cannot give nutritional advice. Like that's insane, especially if we say, oh, when I have a continuous glucose monitor, I have thousands of tracings now that show when you eat cookies and donuts and cake, your sugars go crazy high and you need more drugs to get rid of that. And so that it is astounding that he went through what he did, and he still has a glimmer in his eye. This guy, when you sit down with him, he's one of the most kind, decent, loving, compassionate people I've ever met. And you think, wow. And after going through all that, he just goes, you know, what are you gonna do? They were wrong. I had to prove them wrong. But if he would have backed down, then I'm not talking to you right now, and I'm not doing what I'm doing right now. I mean,
Right.
the amount of influence he had because he stood up and didn't just back down and say, just retire, go off into the sunset, and everything's fine. He knew that he wanted to help people.
I, Without him, I mean, I remain convinced. He was the first one I found, and that, of course, the minute I watched him, Jason Fung came up, and you know, the fact, if I were a doctor, I understand why doctors don't. It's their money, it's their reputation. I mean, I get it. Like all my doctor ever said to me was the numbers don't lie. And the lack of curiosity, I was astounded by that.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that the doctor didn't say, "Hey, I want to send all my diabetics to you and help you. You can help them at least, help them get off their meds." And that's why I think just getting our calling in life, and when and I see that you have this calling and this passion, and you've experienced and you want to help other people, and that's how I feel with Jason Fung and all these people that have come across it. You go, man, these guys really. I know his integrity. Like people will say, "Oh, he's a charlatan." It's like, okay, look, this guy has called how many people he's had in his clinic? They come in for free and he trains them and teaches them and helps them. And ultimately, they're a competition to him. If he's the only guy doing it, he has the monopoly on the market, right? So he didn't have to share everything. But all these people, Gary Fettke, Professor Noakes, these people, like you see, Gary Fettke, he was amputating feet. He gets paid more for doing amputations. He's like, why are we doing amputations? We can prevent this from happening. And then he goes to trial because he's saying, don't eat cereal for breakfast. And then
Right.
they said, well, you can talk about it in your clinic if you want, but you cannot publicly speak about this. He's like, that's ridiculous. I'm helping so many people. They don't have to be my patients. I can still help them. You're a surgeon. You can't talk nutrition. It's like, it's absolute insanity. Yeah.
Well, it is insane. And,
So when you say you only met two doctors that are insane, that's I say what I would argue. I've seen a lot more.
well, maybe I haven't met very many. I don't know. But now we're going to see what this new guy is all about because we have to switch. My relationship with my physician is I need him. I need him for or her, but I'm not being sexist. I wouldn't mind a her, but I need my physician for all the things that I don't know. But I've also learned at the end of the day, whatever my physician says to me, it's part of what I need to do in terms of understanding my health to go home and research, ask questions, challenge. I don't challenge, the last time I was with a doctor, I was with someone else and who has high cholesterol, extremely high cholesterol. And I just asked the doctor, I said, I'm a little curious, doc. Why is it when we're talking about cholesterol, we just give a pill? And I don't. I'm sure you understand. He actually tests for VLDL. I said, I'm sure you understand that the problem is the glycation of the cholesterol molecule and then the subsequent oxidation of that. Why is it that you don't tell this person to cut out sugar and reduce carbs? He said, well, the carbs aren't a problem, but the sugar I would agree with.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
it's
that's
like, well,
that's people just don't understand. Doctors don't understand. I mean, in reality, most of us we got like 1 hour of nutritional training was basically say don't eat fat. That was basically the story. But it's incredible to go. The problem is sugar, and you don't want to go there. And when you look at the science, like you said, the data is there. So I have to ask you, because I want to be respectful
oh,
of your time. And
yeah.
and this has gone way too fast. The whole time looking like, oh, slow down the clock, because you're
All
saying
right.
such great stuff. Um, what benefits, like if I have someone with chronic insomnia, or if I have someone who binge eats at night, things like that, who are your ideal patients that you can really have the most impact on?
My ideal client is the person who wants to change and is willing to embrace this is a lifestyle change, not a diet. I'm not going to do this temporarily. I'm going to do it forever. I'm going to find a new balance. They need to understand that to start off with. So I always spend upwards of an hour with someone even before they become my client, and we talk about that. But they have to understand. I'm not blaming them for it. It's not their fault. They chances are they're eating healthy as they understand it. My ideal client is someone who wants to make a difference and realizes that it's their job. And so sometimes they have to be talked into it, but the only people who have dropped away from me are people who have talked themselves out of it.
Or their
Like,
family members saying, "This is crazy. It's not going to work. Those kind of things." And that's we deal with the same thing.
yeah, they'll say like the most recent lady, she was doing okay, but not progressing fast enough. She wasn't exactly doing everything, and she called me up. She wanted to drop out of the program because her husband refused to support her, and she didn't want to cook two meals at the same time. And I have to say, that old sort of pastor in me kind of peeked through. And I said, look, if you want to leave the program, I understand. But I just want to ask, this is my question that I'm leaving. How is it that a man who promised to love you and keep you in sickness and in health is abandoning you because he wants spaghetti? She looked at me, her eyes. I said, I'm not telling you, I'm not a marriage and family counselor. I'm just saying you're giving up something that can improve and prolong your life for the sake of giving your husband spaghetti. That's all.
Yeah, those things, and I love, and it's funny because just talking to you, the things you say are things that I'm exactly saying too. And so, like you said, the guy with the cheesecake, when someone came in and said, "Oh, it was terrible. I had a piece of cheesecake." First of all, I'm looking and go, "Okay, for 2 weeks you didn't eat anything bad. You had one piece of cheesecake." Second of all, I'll just say, you know what? That just proves you're an evil, terrible person, doesn't it? And then they look at me like, and I go, "Of course not, right? You wanted a piece of cheesecake. You're not evil or terrible. Like, give yourself a break on that, right? What would you do different next time?" And then they'll say, "Well, yeah, I didn't even enjoy it, so I won't have it." Well, then if you don't enjoy it, like you said, don't eat the whole thing. Tag one bite. You go, "It's too sweet. Don't like it. I don't need it. I know what it tastes like." And so many times I'll be somewhere and they'll go, "Oh, try this dessert. I've had it before. I know what it tastes like." I don't really need it. I'm trying to, do better. And so it's a hard thing. And so I think, for me, I'm looking at people that I go, okay, here's going to be the challenge. You're a middle-aged real estate agent going through menopause and you don't plan ahead. You're too busy. You got two kids you're taking care of and you're stressed all the time. It's like, oh, we got a lot to work on. So I'm wondering how much hypnosis would help with just dealing with life stress. Because for me, if you say, Brian, I'll give you one thing you can, or two things that you could really address: stress and sleep. If I get those
Yeah.
two right, everything else falls into place.
Let's stress is a little bit complicated because we have to find out what's behind it. But the sleep could be stress. But one of the things, and I love what you said, what do you do for fun? There are two kinds of relaxation, right? When we go to sleep, our brain cleans itself out. It does some amazing things when we're asleep. If we are sleeping deep non-REM sleep, it's not just the REM sleep, the dreaming and the processing of trauma. It's the deep non-REM sleep.
That's the important stuff for recovery. Yeah.
Yeah. And then second to that is play. If your life has no play in it, then you're not really enjoying life. You're driven. You might driven for success, but playing is a way of getting, whether it's physical, it could be mental play. You've got to do something that is playful or fun. So a lot of times people come into my office We're talking about people. My recliner is 2-seaters for a reason, right? A one-seater might not work. So we're talking about people with mobility issues, and they have to move. And the more they move, the weight starts to come off, but not because of the movement, because of the diet. The diet and the movement, they go together, and their get up and go increases over time. And they start to look for things like, well, do I have to join a gym? I have more energy. I hate going to the gym. I had a client the other day, and I said, what about you and your wife taking ballroom dancing lessons? And he brightened up. He said, my wife would love that. And I said, would you hate it? No, it would be a fun thing. I said, well, let's go and look for a free lesson, you know.
Yeah.
So the sleep, you've got to put the play with it. And of course, there's sleep hygiene. I give my clients a sleep recording that uses a reinduction trigger. So every time I say the word profound rest, my clients, after they practice for a while, when I say, okay, let's just go into profound rest. And so they go immediately.
Wow.
And so it actually lets me spend a little less time in the session, a little bit more time to fill it up. But at the same time, they're benefiting, and I know they're using the recording because that's how it sticks. That recording, we're bringing down stress. So bilateral stimulation is probably the easiest one for me to share with you. Okay. So you notice something is stressing you out. Your boss is a jerk or something. And I'll give my clients a ball, and I'll teach them, when you notice yourself going down that downward spiral into negativity, to anxiety, this will actually interrupt a panic attack. And so I teach them, I say, I want you to pick up the ball. You feel that panicky anxiety coming up, whatever it is going on. You pick up the ball, and all you do is pass it back and forth, thinking about the ball. Now, two things have happened. Because we are thinking about the ball, we're not reinforcing the anxiety circuit. We've shut it out. We've interrupted that. In hypnosis, we call that a pattern interrupt. But we've also done something else, right? We're stimulating two very distinct portions of that somatosensory homunculus, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say it's good to be bald when we're talking about the homunculus. So the hands
Tro will
are
love
back.
you. Tro will love you. I think you're going to meet Tro and Boca, hopefully. We'll see.
They're about here. So what's happening when the ball is in this hand, the electricity is firing over here. I'm not going to do anything about that old circuit. I can't. It's there. And you've been reinforcing it for years. But now we've hijacked some of the electricity here, then here, then here. And what happens over time, the more you do this over time, and of course, basic mindfulness practice comes in, but what happens over time is, when that circuit, let's pretend it's here, that cluster of neurons that wires through your amygdala that tells you, uh-oh, get anxious. I have a little map of neurons and show them. We're hijacking the electricity. And then I say, you're teaching your brain to do something else. Other than panicking, you're teaching your brain to relax. Other than smoking, you're teaching your brain to relax. Other than obsessing, opening the refrigerator, which can stimulate your insulin, by the way, just by opening the refrigerator. Instead of doing that, you teach your brain to relax, so that later, when those instances happen, when your boss walks through your office and says something mean, your brain automatically says, uh-oh, relax. Neuroplasticity. I
And so is
love
that why everyone in my office, whenever I walk in, they're throwing the ball back and forth? I didn't know that
well,
technique.
if they're doing that,
And so they do that physically, and then if they do that, then down the road they're doing it mentally without using the ball.
it just happens because
Yeah.
you've rewired, neurons that fire together wire together, right? That's Hebb's law. So what we're doing is we're weakening that once. We're going to pretend it's here. It's not. It's further in and it goes through the amygdala. But let's pretend it's here. When I've got the electricity going back and forth here, I've hijacked some of the power from that old circuit and I've weakened it. Once I've weakened it, it becomes very weak indeed. This could be a phobia. Oh, I'm nervous in heights. Uh,
Yeah.
and it just turns it around.
That's amazing. Yeah,
You
just little
understand.
stuff, little techniques like that. That's why I'm excited. I'm gonna have you come speak to my people in our Zoom meetings, and I'm excited about it. And so first of all, I want to ask, like, I know you have Deleting Diabetes, you have a book. Is that like
Yeah.
on Amazon or wherever they can get it?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I have one right here if I can show it. Do you mind?
Absolutely. No,
Just
please
so
do.
that they could see the
I want
cover.
to see it. I'm gonna get it.
This is the one that I wrote. It's called Deleting Diabetes. I did it. You can too.
Awesome.
And this is like the self-help book. I have ones that I give my clients when we're working together, sort of a handbook. But I don't recommend doing them on your own because honestly, you'll cherry pick. And if you cherry pick, you're not getting the right information. So I'd rather, I mean, they're there.
So
You
it's
can
more of
buy
a
them.
supplement for people working with you, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
then
that's why I wrote the first one. I just wanted to be able to say, look, here's a book, right? You have your name at the bottom of a book, and people are impressed by that. And they feel like the program, like it puts a little bit more expectation in the program for them.
yeah,
So I make it
awesome.
read it.
And if
Yeah.
people want to be patients, I understand you're nationwide. So if they want to be patients of yours or clients of yours, however,
Clients.
whatever term we're going to
I'm not
use,
a
clients,
doctor.
you're not allowed to say patients, but they're my patients and your clients.
Yeah.
So even though that's the same thing, how do people track you down? Where's the best way to find you?
My name, Joseph Onesta, will work.
Okay.
But Mind Power Pittsburgh.
All right. Mind
And
Power Pittsburgh.
that's my, and you had a question for me before we go, because I know
Yeah,
we're,
yeah. I'm not letting you go yet. Saving that for the end. I warned him I
okay.
was going to ask him something at the end. So Joseph, what is life's best medicine for you? Where do you go when things are down? What gives you joy? What motivates you to help people and do what you're doing? Where if you go, look, Jesus on his deathbed, and I'm going to tell you what matters here. Uh, what would you say is life's best medicine?
I'm going to say love above all. And it's not love just for the people that we like or the people that we're stuck with. It's this idea that we are all one. We're all united in some way, whether I like you or not. If I can cultivate a sense of love for you, total stranger, and I can't step ever into your shoes, but for heaven's sakes, I'm 62 years old. If I live as long as my mother, I have another 38 years. When I published this book, my friend said, may you sell 1 million copies, she said. And she was thinking about the money. My mind immediately went to 1 million people reversing their diabetes. I'm going to leave this planet with nothing. I can't bring anything with me. The thing I want to leave behind is that love. And, if we're going to talk about faith and religion and Christianity, no greater love hath any man than to lay his life down for his friends. And if I may, for the Christians out there, the Bible says any man who says he loves God but doesn't love his neighbor is a liar. First John, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's so important. I mean, that's the thing that as Christians we have to overcome. When I started talking about faith on my other podcast, people would just not like that at all. They want to talk
Right.
about low carb. I'm like, well, faith is a role. It plays a role, for me at least, and for a
And
lot of people. Like they have turned their life around. You look at the only times I've seen radical transformations in life is through religion and sometimes through diet, through lifestyle. I feel like lifestyle, when people are energized and happy and they can help people, because chances are if you didn't change your lifestyle, you wouldn't be here talking to you. You could be dead by now, right?
yeah,
With the diabetes and just being on insulin and all these other meds. And I see it, and that's why I have a passion for what I do, is that it's one of those beauties of life where I know what's coming as a doctor. I know I've seen the story before. I know how it works. And to prevent you from having a disastrous amputation and lifestyle change of being on dialysis and not being able to think anymore and getting your limbs cut off one at a time, is that if we intervene, we can seriously lengthen your life without you even knowing it, not without saying, "Oh my gosh, Brian, he's the best doctor," because you don't know what was going to happen to you, right? You know what I'm
right.
saying? So those kind of things, when you say, "Well, it doesn't have to be this dramatic surgical intervention where I take out your appendix and save your life," it's really saying, "Look, I want you to be able to play with your grandkids. I want you to have fun." And for us who know we're not taking anything with us when we die, it's like we want to have as much impact and leave people better off than where we found them. You know, we're the type of
Yes.
people, if you're somewhere and there's garbage, you're gonna pick it up, even though it's not your responsibility. And I could see that in you, and that's why, that I could see the peace and that you want to help people. And I'm so glad you were persistent in tracking me down, because I think it's so important that sometimes we get so busy that we just go, okay, I'll answer that email. But I'm so glad we connected, and
Me too.
I know that you can help a lot of people. And I think if doctors would team up with people who, because the way I see it, and I know I can't say this, you use a ton of psychology even though you're not a psychologist. There's a lot that we have to understand, and I think some people, we just get it. You see people and go, gosh, they're suffering. I want to help their suffering. I want to help what they're struggling with. And to be able to really invest in people and give of ourselves, and to be educated and to use this knowledge to help others, instead of saying, oh yeah, just go on this drug and we're never going to, you're never going to come off it, and you're going to have a shorter life and you're not going to see your grandkids or great grandkids. So, what you're doing is so impactful, and it's so great hearing what you're doing with clients, and that you could really impact their lives and make it better, and then coming from a place of suffering as a kid and be able to forgive. When you said that, forgiving those guys that they didn't know what they were doing, like Jesus said on the cross, it's so powerful not to hold on to resentment and bitterness. So anyone listening, I'm telling you that we went like an hour and a half, but it's such critically important information, and if you're not loving your fellow man and being kind to your neighbor, and you're bitter and stressed and tense all the time, you got to look at that. Because playing, going, having fun, and saying, okay, I'm putting everything down, I'm going to go for a walk with the dog on the beach, or I'm going to throw the ball or do something silly, or go to dance classes, do something, move, get out there. So Joseph, it's been an absolute blessing having you on. I greatly appreciate you, and really look forward to meeting you one day in person, and then we can convert the rest of the medical guys over here in San Diego to understand what we're talking about. But man, it's so awesome, and I know Bill's gonna listen. So Bill, man, thank you for everything. What a great guy. I really like him, and I'm appreciative that he made this connection. So ironic that he's here in San Diego, and we work together, and you work together as hypnotists. I mean, it's pretty amazing how we all cross paths and connect. And I'm just excited about my struggling patients to see, say, hey, let's try hypnosis, let's give it a shot, what the heck, right? And and uh and then whatever else, whatever tools we have in our bag, we work together and figure those things out. So, and as far as your licensing goes, you can do online with people all over, correct?
Yeah, I can work with people all over. In certain states, I can't call myself a hypnotherapist, but I don't use that phrase. I use clinical hypnosis practitioner.
Yeah, and
And in
that's
the state,
exactly it. Yeah, and I
yeah,
think that's really important too. um Clinical hypnosis is different than being on stage and doing crazy stuff. So, but being trained in all these areas, you kind of you understand it, and and but just having the compassion, the kindness, that's what people need. So everyone listening, thank you for your continued support. Sometimes you step out of your comfort zone and try different things, but be kind to yourself, be kind to others, leave the world in a better place, love those around you, kind of look at those eyes of people and understand they're human. They're not just traffic around you or people in your way in line and all those stuff. Kind of the more you observe, the more you see the struggles that are going on around us, bring some peace. That's what we're trying to do with this podcast. And, thanks to my sponsors who make all these stories possible. But Joseph, thank you so much. It's been so great having you.
It's been my pleasure. My pleasure. And I look forward to meeting you in person
Yeah,
someday.
we will. Maybe something will work out in Boca. We'll see. I'm gonna see. And for anyone going to Boca for the Low Carb USA conference, then you're gonna see Joseph there. Ask him questions, and he's part of the family here. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information. And hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.